semester. So particular welcome to all those who come from outside ANU also for the seminar. In addition, I'd like to thank the Malaysian students associated with the Malaysian Progressives in Australia who have helped with publicity and helped support this seminar. These are momentous times in Malaysia at the moment. In the last couple of months, just to take a few examples, we've seen the jailing of the head of the opposition party, Ibrahim, for 5 years on sodomy charges. The death of Nick Aziz, the long-time spiritual leader of the party Islam, just a couple of days after our was jailed. Dozens of arrests under the Sedition Act. Reports of Malaysians supporting the Islamic State. And indeed, on Sunday, there were 17 arrests, people who were said to be planning attacks on various parts of the city in Kuala Lumpur, and seizing control to establish an Islamic State in Malaysia. We've seen the passage of a Prevention of Terrorism Act, with several aspects to it that are very similar to the Internal Security Act, which of course was just removed 2 or 3 years ago, including detention without trial. We've also seen the tabling of a new sedition law, under which, if the prosecution demands it, people can be denied bail. In addition to that, there have been major conflicts within the two major Malay political parties, UMNO and PAS. In UMNO, of course, there's been a very determined effort by the former Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, who remains influential in spite of being out of power for a number of years and nearly 90 years of age. And he has demanded that the present Prime Minister Najib should stand down. Within PAS, there's been a conflict between people who are called progressives and the ulama section, the religious section of the party, and an effort by them to encourage the leader of the party, Mr. Hudud, to stand down. So this is the background to a situation where PAS has renewed attempts, which of course it had started back in 1993 when it passed provision for Hudud law in Kelantan, the state that rules. So this is a renewed attempt by them to enforce the rather extreme version of criminal law under Islamic law in Malaysia. This time around, unlike 1993, several UMNO leaders have said that they will actually support this and encouraged us to come up with its own private members' bill, which they said they will support in Parliament. Well, the Kelantan State Assembly has now passed the Hudud law, and the issue has now been put to the Parliament to consider this as a private member's bill, something rather unusual in Malaysia. So what are the implications of these for the overall situation of politics in Malaysia, given the background that I've outlined before, both domestically and also in terms of international relations as well? Malaysia's image as a moderate Muslim nation. Is it constitutionally possible to introduce Hudud law in Malaysia? We're very fortunate indeed, I think, to have two very expert people to comment on these issues. First of all, Dato Saifuddin, who is the face of moderation and democracy in government. Indeed, perhaps too much for his own good, I suspect. Otherwise, I think he might still be an MP. And we have the Tong, Member of Parliament, and of course a former graduate, honours in Asian Studies from ANU.
Supervised by Dato.
Could I ask Dato Saifuddin to begin with presenting, giving his presentation, and we'll talk for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then Tong will do the same, and then we'll be open to questions and discussion.
Thank you, Professor Funston. Assalamu alaikum.
peace be upon all of you. When I say salam, it means it's meant for Muslim and non-Muslim. Some fatwas don't apply to me. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm honored to be here again. I'm of course in foreign territory. This is Tong's home ground. And I'm supposed to be speaking on behalf of UMNO and his opposition, so we have to start on that line. Thank you again, Funston. What I plan to do within this 20 minutes or so is to share my observation on three things. One is, of course, the question on implementation of Hudud in Malaysia, or in particular in Kelantan. Second is the need for further democratization process in Malaysia, regardless of whether Hudud is going to be implemented or not, whether PAS will leave Pakatan Rakyat or not, and whether or not UMNO will work together with PAS in order to win the Malay votes in the Malay heartland. And thirdly, what would be the most immediate prospect of Malaysian politics? Probably that is something that you guys may want to know. On the Hudud thing, I would propose that Muhammad Hashim Kamali's work entitled The Punishment in Islamic Law, an Inquiry into the Hudud Bill of Kelantan, be one of the major reference if you want to understand the context of the Hudud Bill in Kelantan vis-a-vis the setting in Malaysia. Now, Hudud, as most of you would probably know, comes from the Arabic term had, which means limits. And the Quran mentioned had or Hududullah, Hadadullah 14 times in the Holy Book. None of the 14 mention of Hudud is about fixed punishment as expounded by the Hudud Bill. Most of the Hudud, as mentioned in the Quran, refers to divorce, marriage, and be kind to the orphanage. And the main message of Had or Hudud is actually on the limits on moral obligation. That here is the limit, and you are not supposed to trespass, or you are not supposed to go over the limit. But on those 4 occasions, none of them mentioned about actual punishment, and definitely not fixed punishment like how many lashes, how many stones, or stoning to the death, or something like that. There are, of course, 4 what is known as Hudud offense, which are theft, adultery, accusing others of unholy intimate relation with others, like adultery, and highway robbery. And again, out of these 4 offenses, the juries have different views as to how it should be punished. In fact, there are debates on the traditions of the Prophet himself as to why at one time he did use Hudud, but there is this debate that perhaps that was because before some verses of the Quran which mention or give signal to alternative punishment was sent down. So there is a lot of debate on, first of all, do the Hudud Bill in Kelantan actually covers the 4 or 5 or 6 offences? Number 2, is hudud really about fixed punishment? And number three, which is even more important, is that what Sharia law is all about? And most jurists will say that yes, Sharia law includes hudud, but hudud is not all about Sharia law. Yes, Islam includes Sharia law, but Sharia law does not represent the whole of Islam. My position on the question of hudud is, if you were to discuss it from the Maqasid discourse, Maqasid Sharia, looking at the overall and higher and more noble objective of the Sharia, of the Islamic jurisprudence, then it is about upholding justice. Second, is it a priority? Most scholars like Qaradawi, like Hashim Kamali, and the present Mufti of Paris, Dr. Zainal Abidin, will submit to you that in the context of Kelantan, for instance, the priority is building thousands of houses after the big flood, and not about catching people who steal certain things and you submit him or you subscribe him to hudud punishment. People like Yusuf Al-Qaradawi will submit to you that the priority is really about building a good Islamic society or a good Muslim society, depending on how you look at it and how you define it. The whole story about justice in Islam is about inclusive development. It is about making sure that people get jobs. There is the lowest percentage of unemployment, that people get decent job, and so on and so forth. And it's just not about hudud. In fact, people like Qaradawi and other scholars are saying that there is this discussion, there is this position in Islamic jurisprudence that hudud can be suspended. During the time of the third caliph, Umar, he suspended hudud because of famine. It's impossible for you to execute hudud even if there are people stealing, because the reason for people stealing was because of, they just have to meet ends, they can't afford to buy, or because of poverty or because of famine. So the priority, the priority story narrative is about there are many other things that needs to be put in place instead of hudud. Sorry, there are more other pressing matters that needs to be addressed rather than hudud. There is another discourse saying that we are not ready because we have to put many things in place before you can actually implement hudud. Now, in the context of Malaysia, being a federal country with 13 or 14 states including Kuala Lumpur, the Constitution divides certain things into what is federal and what is state. When it comes to hudud, it falls under the administration of Islam, and the administration of Islam, according to the Constitution, falls under the jurisdiction of the state, not a federal matter. And at the same time, there is the penal code, the federal criminal law, which in a certain way have given way, because we practice a dual system where the Muslims, in terms of family law, will go to the Sharia court in certain aspects or for certain offences. So we have given room, the penal code have given room for some criminal procedures under the Sharia court, but with a ceiling. A fine of not more than 5,000 and something like that. Now, if Kelantan were to implement hudud, two things have to happen. First, you have to amend the penal code. Amending the penal code means you have to go to Parliament, you have to amend the law. That can be done through simple majority. But because the power of the state when it comes to Islamic affairs also falls under the jurisdiction of the Constitution, and this is beyond what is given by the Constitution. You have to amend the Constitution. And to amend the Constitution, you have to have two-thirds majority. You can have a situation, therefore, where you can amend the penal code, but still you can execute it because the Constitution is still not amended. So that is the situation. Why is this happening? For PAS to discuss Hudud, it does not come as a surprise because they have been discussing this for years, since time immemorial, since their, not since their inception, but since maybe the Iranian Revolution. There's a history to it. For UMNO to somehow, or at least for some, or a few leaders of UMNO to sort of facilitate the idea that PAS may be allowed to do Hudud, to me is just politics. But even for PAS, it's quite political because they have their election coming in June, and there is this contestation between Haji Hadi, who leads the ulama faction, and the non-ulama faction, which are given different names, like the Edawans, the Anwarinas, the professionals. Some are calling them the Democrat Islamists. So that's the latest term that they use for people like Mujahid, Saifuddin, Zul, and the rest. But it is interesting to see that in this latest debate on Hudud, even the so-called professional and Anwarinas or Edawan, they're not openly opposed the implementation of Hudud, because I suspect, and I really empathize with them, especially my friends like Mujahid and the gang, because election is coming around the corner, party election is coming around the corner. Why is UMNO doing it? I don't have privy to the actual reason why UMNO doing it, because I'm no longer in the loop. I'm on sabbatical. But I suspect is for two reasons. Number one, and this probably they are quite successful. We, so I'm still UMNO. They are quite successful because there seems to be a rift between DAP and PAS. So we have been quite successful in causing that rift or causing that friction. The second reason is probably this is our way of showing the olive branch to PAS that, look, GE14 is coming, for Barisan Nasional to win, we need to ensure we secure the Malay votes. Malay means Muslim votes in the context of Peninsular Malaysia, and perhaps, you can have Kelantan, but, don't disturb us in other places, so on and so forth. I don't know, because I don't have privy to that. But what do we do then? I think there's no other way but to continue with democratization process. Regardless of what happened, as I mentioned at the outset, we must, I think at least for Malaysians, move on from what we have achieved intentionally or unintentionally, by design or by default, from the last two general elections of 2008 and 2013. The contestation between, on the one side you have reformasi or reformation, and on the other side you have transformation under the leadership of Dato Sri Najib, the current Prime Minister. The fact that for the first time the opposition party have their own long-term plan or mid-term plan called the Buku Jingga. To me, it's disturbing for UMNO and Barisan, but it's good for democracy because at least for the first time Malaysians have the Malaysian government's all kinds of policy document, and here is a proposed policy document from the opposition. UMNO and Barisan is quite lucky because Pakatan Rakyat has yet to come up with your schedule cabinet. It's still in the shadows. If only they have come up with a shadow cabinet, I think we could have seen better debates in Parliament, which is good for democracy. when you look at the result of 2008 and 2013, you will see there is a certain trend. I'm not talking about the two-third majority. Two-third majority is one way of looking at it, because you never have in the Malaysian general election where for 2 consecutive general elections the winning party does not have a two-third majority. The first time was in 1969, but that was a very, very extraordinarily rare occasion. But in this case, it is like a trend. What is more important is to look at the number of popular votes that Pakatan Rakyat has gained from 2008 to 2013, or rather, how much we and Barisan Nasional have lost in terms of popular vote. The last count in 2013, we were like 47%. Earlier in 2008, we were like 51%. It was like almost equal. But I'm not looking only at the numbers. I'm looking at the discourse within the electorates. And I'm using a very an academic way of showing my observation. I call the people voting for Barisan Nasional voting based on developmental hopes. The reason is because Barisan Nasional have got no ideology. The only ideology is developmentalism, politics of development, as we used to call it. That number, if you can imagine a big circle, that circle is becoming smaller. In contrast, there is a small circle which started somewhere in 1999, the Reformasi time. The number grew bigger in 2008 and becomes bigger than the first circle. So if you can imagine, there are 2 circles. This new circle, I call it people voting based on democratic hopes. The reason I use it because the issues are democratic issues. Free and fair election, freedom, human rights, and so on and so forth. On the other side, what I call the developmental hopes is that people are talking about the normal stuff. Welfare, roads, water, electricity, housing, and so on and so forth. But the 2 circles are not detached from each other, they are linked like the Olympic ring. What happened in between? In between is this. Even for people who, both sides of the electorates needs basic amenities, no doubt about it. But what is happening in between the 2 big circles is people are asking questions. People who are voting for Barisan Nasional in 2008 and 2013 begin to ask, for instance, yes, thank you, sir, for bringing the road to my kampung, to my village, but at what cost? Is the tender open? And is this the right kind of road that I deserve to get? What kind of clean water do I get? Electricity? Yes. At what cost? Tariff? Going up, going down, and so on and so forth. So people are questioning this. What is the main factor for this thing to happen in 2008 and 2013? Of course, commentators will say this is because of the Reformation and so on and so forth. But I thought there is something else which is even more interesting. The emerging new middle ground, as I call it. Do you call it the new middle Malaysia? So we are quite friendly to each other. And the new middle ground consists of or comprises of the young voters, students, youth activists, the technocrats, the entrepreneurs, professional academia. Academia means lecturers and also teachers, school teachers, and so on and so forth. The new middle ground, according to UMCDL, the University of Malaya Center for Democracy and Election, that used to be led by Professor Ridwan Usman, they consist of about 20 to 30% of the electorate in 2013, slightly smaller in 2008. What is more important, again, is not the number, but the fact that with the advent of the ICT and new media, sorry, if I can rephrase it, before 2008 or before 1999, without the advent of the ICT and the new media, this 20 to 30% odd, this cohort of electorate, go to the ballot box on the voting day, not knowing who are the other so-called individuals who are in that cohort. They don't know each other. They're not interacting with each other. But in 2008 and more so in 2013, because of the advent of the ICT and new media, they are already in contact with each other in a certain way, because they write their own blogs, they read the same blogs, or they read the same online newspapers and so on and so forth. So Ridwan is saying that in 2013, this cohort of electorates went to the ballot box with what he called as accumulated opinion. And compared to 2008 and below, this 20 to 30%, you can't see them moving in terms of their support until the very last day. But in 2013, the moment the dates of the election were announced, you see them moving. And in 2013, they were moving towards Pakatan Raya. So, what is that democratization process that I was alluding to earlier? To me, it is about picking up the positive points that was happening within these two general elections and move forward with it. For instance, the fact that there are now debates on policies is a good thing. Perhaps the next GE will see the two leaders of the two packs having their own so-called presidential debate. Number two, the fact that the new middle ground are voting in a certain way. And this is not about them voting this side or that side. Voting with an opinion, I think is important. I'm not so worried about them voting which side, but voting with an educated opinion, I think is important for Malaysian democracy. Number three, the fact that some of the electorates are becoming more colorblind. I stand for election for the first time in 2008 in Temerloh. Temerloh is in the state of Pahang, 1.5 hours from Kuala Lumpur. It's a semi-urban city. 60% Malay votes, Malay voters, and the others are non-Malays, just like Malaysia. Yeah. In 2008, I saw for the first time in my constituency non-Malays holding flag of the Islamic Party. The candidate in me said, "Then you are in trouble." The Democrat in me said, "Then this is a good thing." Because all the while, in the past, it is only within Barisan Nasional you see MCA workers holding UMNO flags and vice versa, but you don't really see this in the opposition pack. In 2013, I won the first one. In 2013, the last election, I saw more non-Malays waving past flag. And I said, "Then you are in shit, you know, this is big trouble." But the Democrat in me said, "Hey, this is okay, this is good for the country." And for the first time in Temerloh at least, you see in the Malay kampung, in the Malay villages, you have DAP flags. And I said, "This is real shit, man." I lost. So the candidate in me, okay, I'm sad because I lost. But the Democrat in me, 24 hours after my big boss, Dato Najib said to the world, the result was like this because of Chinese tsunami. I went on TV and said, "I don't believe it's a Chinese tsunami. I think it is something else." And we have to understand what is happening, what the electorates are thinking. And I think they are going forward. Now, if a survey by the Merdeka Center, or rather the survey by Malaysian Insider, commissioned to Merdeka Center in March this year, can be useful, 77% of the respondents, you may see some leadership issues, but I suppose he is more than able to resolve those issues as long as he is still in control of the party. So thank you, sir.
We go straight on to Tong now, and questions after both speakers.
Thanks, John. It's good to be back, although this is only for a day and a half. I last came back 5 years ago. Didn't know it was so fast. And thanks especially for friends and my former teachers who came today, former High Commissioner. Perhaps I want to start with the word. I want to focus on realignment of Malaysian politics, because I'll talk about realignment, therefore I don't see Saifuddin as on the other side. I think Malaysian politics is due for realignment. Now, what I mean by realignment, I think one major realignment that I can think of was what happened after Anwar went to prison in 1998. In 1998, because of Anwar's imprisonment, suddenly 400,000 Malays who hated Mahathir but didn't trust Anwar joined PAS and doubled PAS membership in 1998. Within a year. At that time, PAS was printing a membership card 24/7 because there were just too many people joining PAS. And also, at that point of time, Anwar set up his party while he was in prison. The wife-led Parti Keadilan with some ABIM people as base, Islamic Youth Movement people as the base, but multiracial with many NGO, former NGO activists joining Parti Keadilan. So the 98 realignment or earthquake happened with new forces, particularly new Malay forces, emerge as player, and they are influencing what is happening now. And that those dynamics in 98 has impact on what we are facing now, in particular when it comes to the issues of Hudud. And with what is going on now, will there be realignment of political forces? Will there be new forces emerging? I think that is the questions for Malaysian politics. 98 created a new PAS in many ways. PAS leadership, which hold power until today, actually came about in 1982. Perhaps I should go back a bit earlier. After the 1969 race riot, Razak took over, and Razak had his grand coalition idea. He brought in PAS into the political system, into the governing coalition, expanded the governing coalition from a three-party UMNO, FCA, MIC party coalition called the Alliance into Barisan Nasional just before the 1974 election. And with that, the Islamic Party and also Gerakan, a former opposition party, joined Barisan Nasional, formed coalition government with Barisan Nasional, leaving the DAP outside as the opposition party. Now, when PAS was within Barisan Nasional until November 1977, that few years, it was also one of the most difficult years in Malaysian politics at that point of time. At that point of time, because of the oil crisis, there were famine, there were people starving because of low commodity prices in Baling, Kedah. Anwar Ibrahim at that time emerged as a very important political figure, not a politician himself, but he was leading Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia, or ABIM, as a very important societal force when PAS was within the regime. PAS was within the governing coalition, and there was no Islamic forces, no Islamic alternative outside the governing coalition, challenging the governing coalition, and therefore Anwar played that role. And Anwar emerged as a very important figure, and he was arrested under ISA in 1974, came out in 1976. And Anwar campaigned for the Islamic Party in 1978 election. Anwar was campaigning for PAS, and everyone thought that Anwar would eventually become the new PAS president. In fact, the then past President Dato Muda, in order to fend off challenges from within his party, actually offered the position of past president to Anwar. But Anwar didn't take it up. And a week before the 1982 general election, Anwar joined UMNO and became UMNO's Islamic face from then onwards. And that was just 2.5 years after the Iranian Revolution. So the 1982 general election gave UMNO an Islamic face. And that Islamic face came from the 1970s movement. So the 1970s Abin people went into UMNO, but the other important person was Fadil Noor. Fadil Noor went into PAS, contested as PAS candidate in 1978 and 82. Hadi Awang was actually also from Abin. Hadi Awang was an activist, Terengganu-based Abin activist, not very important. But he went into PAS and became a fireban activist or leader in his own right. Half a year after the 1982 election, general election, PAS had its own internal meeting. And in that national meeting, Muktamar, Asri was forced out. The then president was forced to quit the party, forced to resign from his position, and eventually he was kicked out from the party. In that general election, 1982 general election, PAS had 5 MP. Eventually, 4 out of 5 were kicked out from the party, leaving Nik Aziz alone. And that was, in fact, a major coup within the party that installed the leadership, the current leadership, that held power until today. Mujahid Yusuf Rawa's father, Yusuf Rawa became the president. He was an old-timer. Nik Aziz was also a relatively old-timer at that time, but played an important role. And also, Fadil Noor from Abin, Hadi Awang from Abin, becoming key leaders in PAS in 1982. Hadi was only 35 years old at that time. And that particular leadership came with an idea called Kepimpinan Ulama, or Ulama leadership. The Ulama leadership was, my thesis supervised by John. I argue that the idea of Kepimpinan Ulama, which is now regarded as a sacred cow, cannot be touched, came about as a political differentiation strategy. In order for PAS to differentiate itself from UMNO, which has an Islamic face by now with Anwar's entry, and also for the new leadership in PAS to differentiate themselves from the Asri leadership, which at that time, during the entire 70s, focused on Malay supremacy. So the competition of 1970s between UMNO and PAS was about Malay supremacy, or who was more protective of the Malays in face of the challenges from non-Malays. But in the 80s, the debate was about who was more Islamic in the face of the kafir, the infidels. So the terms of reference changed because of Anwar's entry into UMNO and because of this radicalization of PAS in the 80s in order to fend off challenges from UMNO and also from their own party. So that Kepimpinan Ulama was meant to be a way to enhance their legitimacy within the party and outside the party. And Hudud came about as part of the package. There was no discussion of Hudud up until 1982. Or Hudud wasn't featured heavily in the whole discourse. Hudud was not an important factor in Malaysian politics up until 1982. But from 1982 onwards, it was that debate about who was more Islamic, to the extent that in 1981, Hadi, as a young man, had this Amanat Hadi. He has his own sermon, and he said that not only that non-Muslim are infidels. If there are Muslims supporting UMNO, they can also consider they could also be considered as infidels, and therefore it gave rise to a very polarized society, where some Muslims pray separately with different imam, the dual imam issues in the 80s. But today we're coming to to a situation of the clashes between the class of 1982 and the class of 1998. Those who joined PAS in 1998 are usually people who came from the west coast of Peninsular Malaysia, whereas those earlier people were people from Kelantan, Terengganu, Perlis, and Kedah. So there was this geographical divide. There was also a generational divide. Those who joined PAS in 98, many of them were the sons of new economic policies. They were kids or young adults in the 70s, and they were born probably after independence, the baby boomer, and by 90s they were in their 30s, they were in their 40s, and they live in urban centers rather than their hometown in the northern states. So it was those urban people, and most of them are not ulama. PAS used to be a party, they call it Pak Lebai, in a very in a not very respectful way, that people of religious training but not very sophisticated people, that was the image of PAS among the Malaysians, among the Malays, in the eyes of the Malays before that. But with the entry of young professionals, middle-aged professionals who hated Mahathir but didn't trust Anwar, PAS had a new opportunity to become a national party with a national ambition. And my thesis, which I did in 2004, looked at the internal division within the party, with one group wanting to uphold their principle, and with the other group thinking about expanding political influence and winning power in the context of a coalition, with a clear understanding that there's no possibility for PAS to win power on its own, and therefore it needed coalition partners, and to do it together with coalition partners. And the clash has happened since 1998, and we are now seeing this clash of the class of 1982 and the class of 1998. But we also see multiple factors at play in the recent fight. Not only that PAS is having its problem and having its election in June, but this is for the first time in Malaysian history where PAS is split down right in the middle, two camps at the least, if not more. But UMNO is also split, and the split within UMNO has also impact on PAS. Now, UMNO is divided. UMNO is divided now, of course, obviously, between Dr. Mahathir, the best opposition leader that we have ever had. He's very effective. Dr. Mahathir is the most effective opposition leader.
With impunity.
Yeah, with impunity. And of all the prime ministers we had, he contributed to the downfall of Tunku Abdul Rahman, Hussein On, Abdullah Badawi, of course, and potentially Najib. The only two persons who were not demolished by Dr. Mahathir was because Tun Razak, he died too early, and also Mahathir himself. So he was the most effective opposition leader. Also, the split within UMNO is obvious, and also there were elements in UMNO trying to manipulate the split within PAS. There were elements of UMNO trying to manipulate the split within PAS with a few objectives. The first objective is to split PAS. The second objective is to split Pakatan Rakyat. And by splitting Pakatan Rakyat, it will help Barisan Nasional. Because the thinking behind some UMNO strategies is that if we can take out Anwar Ibrahim from action, if we can demolish or break Pakatan, there will be no challenge. However difficult we have, however difficult difficulties UMNO face, whatever difficulty UMNO faces, it doesn't matter because there will be no credible alternative fighting UMNO. So those were the thinking behind it. This Hudud debate started in 27th of March 2014 with Minister Jamil K promising PAS in Parliament. If you want to implement Hudud in Kelantan, please bring a private member's bill in Parliament, and UMNO will support the private member bill. You can implement it in Kelantan. And subsequently, joint technical committee between the Kelantan state government and the federal government had numerous meeting and came up with the idea that they will push it to the State Assembly with a new amended bill and also to the Federal Parliament. Now, with all this happening, what would be the future for Malaysian politics? You talk to 10 person, I think out of 10, 9 will say it's very depressing. We are preparing to migrate. But I think there are potential for realignment. There are potential for realignment, and I think Malaysian politics is due for realignment. Within UMNO, it's very clear that Najib would not be able to hold on for too long, because while he can hold on, and I fully agree with Dato Saifuddin that Najib can control the elites in UMNO, and there's no mechanism to remove him. Because the only mechanism to remove him is the UMNO elite saying that you have to go. So there's no mechanism, they've taken away the ladder, or taken away the key, so there's no way to remove him. But if you look at the polls, the last polls in February showed that his popularity is 44%. I was told that the latest Merdeka poll, his popularity is even lower, maybe comparable to Tong. But he is very unpopular, and within the party, people will be asking questions. Can we sustain with this Prime Minister, or do we need a new Prime Minister? So at some point that clash will have to happen. In what form, in what way, we'll have to see. But I think there is also a vacuum. Everyone knows that UMNO is not popular, but no one has an answer to UMNO now. Today, the opposition is not, I would say very frankly, the opposition at its current state may not be able to win power, may not be convincing enough to win power. Particularly, it is not convincing enough to win the hearts and minds of Malays in the semi-urban areas. Now, in the last election, of course, Najib said that it was Chinese tsunami, the only Chinese voted for the opposition, but it wasn't true. The urban Malays swung to the opposition, which is why the opposition received 52% of the vote. But where the opposition failed to win the pockets of seats in southern Kedah, the triangle of southern Kedah, the mainland part of Penang, and northern Perak. There's that triangle with a cluster of seats. The opposition failed to win the seats in southern Perak, northern Selangor, like Tanjung Malim, Bahkan Dato, Kuala Selangor on the Selangor side, Ulu Selangor. There are about 7 or 8 seats in that cluster. And the opposition failed to win the seats in northern Johor, Muar, Ledang, Segamat, Lapis, and those seats. Very marginally. And of course, seats in the western part of Pahang, Rao, Cameron Highland. So the opposition failed to convince semi-urban Malays, partly because of race factor, partly because of various other issues. But the next election, Barisan Nasional will be vulnerable. Why is it vulnerable? Number one, Najib has scandals to answer. Number two, the economy is not doing well, and the economy for this particular rural belt, semi-urban or semi-rural belt is not doing well. And finally, there is another factor called Sabah Sarawak, which I will discuss later. Why is the economy a factor? For the last 10 years or 12 years since the Iraq War, oil prices were high, but oil prices is no longer high. The Malaysian government depends on oil quite substantially. 30% of the budget comes from oil, and now the price is half. But there is another commodity which also went high with oil, and that's palm oil. Palm oil is more politically salient. Of course, with less oil money, the government will have less. Governments will be limited in its ability to buy people. But palm oil was politically salient because if you know Felda, if you know all these semi-urban areas, they depended on palm oil. Now with palm oil prices getting lower and lower, the semi-urban areas are not doing well. The Malaysian economy is also not doing well because the world economy is not doing well. There are 4 major engines in the world: US, Japan, Europe, China. Only US is doing well, and only export to US is doing well, the rest is not good. In particular China, and I think this is very similar, how I would say this is quite similar with Australia, the case of Australia. And domestically, the government is pushing a new tax. The government is pushing new tax, the government is pushing waivers called GST, which Australian audience will be very familiar with. Pushing a new tax, that tax on consumption, when 60% of the people are recipients of RIM, which is this One Malaysia assistance program. So 60% of the population receive 950 ringgit a year from the government. The government recognizes that these people earn a monthly family income of less than 4,000 ringgit, therefore they are given assistance, but on the other hand, a tax is imposed on them when they consume. So with all these multiple economic factors, there is a clear vacuum. The multiple economic, political factors, there is a vacuum in the peninsula. The vacuum in the peninsula calls for new Malay leadership. New Malay leadership that provide alternative to UMNO. And I think these new forces may come in the form of moderate establishment figures. I'm not sure whether Saifuddin is one of them. There are also Islamists, many Islamists who are not yet in the political process. There are many groups, many Islamists who are who are active in social activism, but not politicians yet. I think that is also another area where new Malay Muslim leadership will come from. And of course, the young Malays. 70% of the populations are below 40 years old, year 1 to year 40. And there are many young Malays. Young Malays can also be a force to be reckoned with in the process. So I think at some point there will be some realignment, and in what form, in what way, we are not sure. Of course, realignment will also happen in past. Whether the ulama wins or whether the progressive win, I think there will be realignment. There will be cracks, they will have to realign, and from there, presenting new forces. Because one group wants to work with UMNO, that group thinks that Malaysian politics is about Malay ganging up together, so that UMNO has the majority, 2/3 majority in parliament to redraw the boundary of seats, and therefore creating more Malay seats, and therefore there will be permanent Malay dominance. The other group believe that they have to work with all partners and focusing on democratization and economic justice. So these are the debates in the country. My final point is that because there's lack of leadership from Najib and also this fragmentation, one important factor will be Sabah and Sarawak. This Hudud bill doesn't just cause problems for Pakatan, it is also presenting a very difficult situation for Sabah, for Najib from Sabah and Sarawak. The Sabah and Sarawak parties came out openly and said, and Muslim included, came out openly and said that if Najib support the Hudud bill presented by Hadi, they will quit Barisan Nasional. So it's also affecting Barisan Nasional in Sabah and Sarawak. And Sabah and Sarawak will be an important factor, will remain to be an important factor, however the reconfiguration happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both of you for keeping your time, and we now have the rest of the session available. We've covered a very wide range of issues, I think, and I think I'm happy to allow debate to continue on that way. So, where's the first question?
Tony, historian here. You mentioned Kim Jong, but perhaps both of you might want to answer. You mentioned, you mentioned the sort of failure of Pakistan in certain areas of Islam and so forth. But what about in East Malaysia? I mean, one would have thought the level of dissatisfaction in East Malaysia is probably greater than anything in the Final Peninsula, and yet the opposition has failed, it seems dismally, to figure out a way to tackle it. Why is that, and is that likely to change?
I think in Sabah, the Pakatan failed to negotiate with local parties, and of course local parties failed to negotiate with Pakatan, and therefore there were multiple corner fights, and that multiple corner fight resulted in losses of seats, where in certain seats, for instance in the seat of Khairul Ketingan, his brother together with another candidate, his brother Jeffrey Ketingan together with another opposition candidate, had a combined votes more than Khairul Ketingan's vote. So that is one area where I think we fail to negotiate or fail to compromise. But also, in the case of Sarawak, it is not easy. In the case of Sarawak, the Sarawak bureaucracy is actually quite an effective bureaucracy in terms of controlling the longhouses, in terms of manipulating votes in longhouses in whatever way, and also with poverty. So I think Sabah and Sarawak will not be easy. But if you ask me, I would think that Sabah has more potential now. Sabah looks like a place where major things will happen. Very happy people with a lot of issues and relatively well-informed people compared to, say, rural areas in Sarawak. I think Sarawak's government's grip over the rural area is much stronger than Sabah's government grips over the rural area. Therefore, I feel that changes in Sarawak will be much more limited, and it can only happen in the form of party-to-party realignment, not necessarily from the groundswell. But in Sabah, there was history of groundswell change, and in Sabah, I think there are potential for that.
Yeah, the other way of looking at it is, if you remember my observation on the two circles, the developmental circle and the democratic circle, you will see that until today, Barisan Nasional seems to do very well. The more rural the constituencies are, Barisan Nasional will be doing much better. The more urban, then Barisan Nasional seems to have lost almost all of the, I think Barisan have lost all the urban seats, lost most of the semi-urban seats, including the predominantly Malay semi-urban like Kuala Nerus in Terengganu. Used to be a very strong sort of UMNO. We have never lost a single seat, but we lost 5-0 this time, 1 parliament and 4 state assembly seats within that. Yes, I think Sabah will be more vulnerable in the eyes of, in our perspective, in the coming GE. Besides what Tong was saying, is also this dissatisfaction on how Putrajaya has managed to fulfill the promises of Malaysia Agreement of 1963. So there are lots of debates in terms of royalty, in terms of decentralization, representation in even government positions, and even on the notion of Bumiputra, son of the soil, context, where people in Sabah, to a certain extent in Sarawak, but more in Sabah, felt that yes, we are Bumiputra, but they seem to be thinking that we are like second-class Bumiputra.
Major policy, I mean, I'm talking about mainly economic policy, whether there's much of a divide. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Tong to answer on the economic policy. I think in 2013, I would expect, as a Malaysian Democrat, I would expect Pakatan will come out stronger because they have ruled Selangor and Penang. I think they did come up with something for Selangor and Penang, but the buku jingga I leave it to you. I thought I welcome buku jingga because then there is a debate going on. Otherwise, you go to election based on manifestos. Manifestos are, instant policy. You can't even call it policy. Promises. So buku jingga is more serious. I think the more you bring this kind of book, the more we will be in trouble. I think for Barisan Nasional, what needs to be done is, in the context of the new middle ground, Barisan Nasional needs to show that they are championing something. For the last 3 general elections, I think we have lost the plot. We have allowed Pakatan Rakyat to be the champion of something. Whether that something is really concrete or not, there is another story altogether. But I think Barisan have lost the plot. We have to get back the plot. We have to rewrite our script and be a champion of something. Because the new middle ground looks at people who champion at something besides other things.
Thanks, Tong. First of all, I mean, Najib has really no policy to speak about. Najib has this document called the New Economic Model, which was released on 31st of March 2010, but subsequently it was abandoned, and practically it was a Mahathir's project, big project, reincarnation of Mahathir's big project approach without much larger thing. There are 3 major arenas of policy debate in Malaysia. There's one associated with democratization, and the Bersih movement over the last 10 years was practically that area, democratization. There was also this debate about economic justice, whether Pakatan stands for the rakyat, and Pakatan accusing Barisan Nasional for only helping the cronies. And there was another area which is race, religion, royalty. I call it the 3R issues. These 3R issues are basically UMNO's domain. And UMNO likes to play that because they know that this is where they are strong, the Malay dominance debate, and they are hoping that they can get 65% Malay votes, and therefore there's no need to debate about other issues. But the economic reality may prevent that. If you want something that is more reflective, I would say in the last election, Pakatan did come up with some policies, but it was not sufficient enough, for instance, to move the critical semi-urban areas. In the last election, Pakatan was remembered for coming up with policies like turun harga kereta, reducing car prices. Malaysia is one of the most expensive car price in the region and perhaps in the world. Turun harga minyak, reducing petrol price. Hapuskan toll, abolishing the toll road or toll for highway, so that to make all highway free. Hapuskan PTPTN, which is a public loan for students, university students. So these were the signature policies that were remembered. But there is a problem there because half of the Malay population are on motorbikes. Petrol doesn't concern them. Toll, motorbikes is not required to pay toll. Motorcyclists are not required to pay toll. Car prices has no relevance to people who earn 500 Australian dollar per month. So you have a problem there. And most, well, I would say 2/3 of the Malays did not go to university. They probably finished high school. So university loan has nothing to do with them. And I think that's where, in terms of policy, we have not been able to present a wider range of policies that can convince and reassure, especially Malays in semi-urban areas. I think Malays in semi-urban areas were susceptible to race discourse because in those areas, most of the employers are ethnic Chinese and employees are ethnic Malays. And therefore, race argument works. UMNO just go there and say, well, the Chinese has taken over the economy and they are now here. In the guise of Pakatan, the Chinese wants to take over political power. And that works in those areas because they see Chinese employers. But Chinese employers are also suffering in the wider scheme of things because they are not helped. The only subsidies that the government gave to the employers in the semi-urban areas are cheap foreign labor. That is the only subsidy that they have. And why do the government so generously providing cheap foreign labor to those people? Was because for every foreign workers that comes into our country, someone make a cut somewhere. So that was not articulated. There was no articulations of lifting the industry, moving them to a higher level, so that in order for them to reduce their reliance on labor and therefore paying each of the Malaysian workers better. I think those articulation was not there, and therefore I think we failed in those areas for a certain economic reason. Of course, it was mixed with race and other issues. But we were very successful in urban areas, and even among urban Malays, we were very successful because they were driving cars, they were students who had PTPTN loan, there were people who have to go through toll. So in many ways, I think we were constrained by our urban vision and not able to understand or not able to communicate with this group of people. But with the economic downturn, with the declining palm oil prices, with GST, with all this coming together at once, if Pakatan or the opposition or whoever will fill in this gap, this vacuum, can provide a sensible overall package that actually brings not racial, but actually brings the economy to the next level, then I think that would help.
Bob?
Thank you, Miles Cooper. Good to see you both here in Canberra again. I wonder if you're concerned about the effect of the developments you've been talking about on Malaysia's image overseas, a country which at one stage looked pretty progressive. But now, with talk about Hudud, with the outcome of the second Anwar trial, what's happening with the Sedition Act and detention of various people, very sadly the two air crashes or disappearances and now a helicopter crash as well. All this, I think, is affecting how Malaysia is seen overseas, and not just in isolation, because I would suggest that Indonesia is looking a lot brighter, a much more vigorous democracy, a free press. Apart from the death penalty issue at the moment in Australia, it's looking more progressive. I'd be interested in your comments on how Malaysia's image will be affected over the coming period.
I think I wrote an article a couple of years ago saying that there was a book called A Nation in Waiting, describing Indonesia in the 90s. I think Malaysia is a nation in waiting for change for too long, for far too long. Since Reformasi, the debate was more or less the same up until now, and Reformasi was 17 years ago. Those things can only change when there is democratization in Malaysia. But with Najib now being under threat, perhaps Najib is thinking about repeating how Mahathir regained strength in 1987 and 2001. In 1987, UMNO was split. Mahathir fought against Tunku Razali, Tunku Razali fought against Mahathir, and Mahathir prevailed with a small thin majority of 43 votes at the UMNO Assembly. And half a year later, there was racial clashes out of something very insignificant, and therefore legitimized ISA arrest in 1987. And subsequently, Mahathir regained his strength in 1987 or 88. That was 87, 88. In 2001, Mahathir was being asked by his party members to leave after the defeat of Barisan National candidate in the Lunas by-election in November 2000. But immediately after that, Mahathir created some racial Malay-Chinese issue and subsequently arrested Keadilan leaders under ISA for 2 years. And subsequently, there was this debate about Negara Islam, Islamic State in June 2000 that led to the breakup of Barisan Alternative, the then opposition coalition. And by June 2002, Mahathir has regained his strength to the extent that he could announce his retirement very comfortably because there was no more opposition coalition and there was no challenge from within, because if you challenge him from within, someone is being arrested, ISA, the readiness to use ISA. I think what happened over the last few months, apart from the lack of leadership, perhaps also there was some design to regain control over the political processes on the part of Najib. So to answer your questions, the external image can only change or improve when the local domestic politics has a different dynamic. And that different dynamic will not come when Najib is under threat, when UMNO is under threat. It has to happen when UMNO is confident or Malaysia has a new government. I think it will only happen when UMNO is very confident, open, moderate, which is not impossible. Immediately after the 1990 election, when Mahathir sensed that without the non-Malay support, he would be in trouble. And therefore, he came up with the idea of Vision 2020, 1991. Between 1991 and 2005, in that 14 years, there were only several occasions where Chinese was used as a bogeyman locally in domestic politics. Whenever Mahathir needed an enemy, he could find it everywhere in the world. So it was with the US was the enemy, the British, the recalcitrant Australians, and the most convenient, the Singaporeans. But rarely Chinese was targeted within the country because UMNO was confident and he was able to handle things. But since 2005, I think they were not playing that game and they were moving to the right. And I felt that unless there is a new government or unless UMNO is able to be confident.
Thank you.
Well, you are the former High Commissioner to Kuala Lumpur, you understand this story very well, sir. I think in 2010, but before that, the image of Malaysia overseas has always been a moderate, modern Muslim country. And in 2010, in his maiden speech at the UN General Assembly as Prime Minister, he made this clarion call for the moderates of the world to join him in what is known as the Global Movement of Moderates, the GMM. Unlike now 2 years working on the GMM thing, or almost 2 years, I remember very clearly that I think in the first year, when I meet up with diplomats in Kuala Lumpur, there is a certain way of, I would say, questioning. Diplomats were asking questions in a certain way. Like, for instance, Din, capital, which means your home capital, is saying that Malaysia is good, Malaysia is moderate, Malaysia is becoming progressive. When we send report that something is not really, something not very well is happening, capital asks back, are you sure your report is right? After that 1 year, or rather now coming from 2014 until now, the line of thinking or the line of clarification that people ask from me is what's actually happening. Yeah, what is really happening? I think I can't say if we have suffered in terms of international perception, but I suspect we could have done much better. And if Najib can weather the storm, and if he can regain his stretcher to continue his transformation program, which he started very well. The political transformation, including repealing of the ISA, including his promise to repeal Sedition Act, including amendment to Section 15 of the University and University College Act, and a couple of other things. In fact, I used to say before that without the transformation program, Barisan Nasional could have lost more seats more of the semi-urban seats in the last general election. So the way forward for him, when we counsel him, and others too, when they counsel him, is for him to go on doing this transformation. And that is why I would say that, yes, if you want to regain our, if I can say, progressive impression overseas, is for Dato Sri Najib to continue his transformation work.
Thank you.
You have interestingly described the internal dynamic in Malaysia with regard to the issue of corruption. I'm just wondering, whether what's going on in the Middle East with the rise of the ISIS and other Islamic groups, does it have any bearing on the internal debate inside Malaysia on this issue and also on effort to Islamize Malaysia?
Okay. I don't think so. At least not directly. The Hudud discourse is a past discourse. I still, to the best of my knowledge, is not interested in Hudud. If they amputate for different reasons. Sorry to be, they amputate the head. It's for different reasons. Yeah. I don't think ISIL is within that discourse. In fact, I would say, within the Islamic movement, the Hudud discourse by PAS and supported by pockets of UMNO leadership in Malaysia is actually not really mainstream. What is mainstream within the Islamic movement is actually wasatiyah, or moderation, led by figures like Yusuf al-Qaradawi and a few others. The main discourse in political Islam is about embracing democracy. The Arab Spring is not about hudud. The Arab Spring is about democrat Islamists believing in democracy and freedom and human rights and what have you. It's not about hudud. The Ikhwan that translates itself into the Justice Party in Egypt is not about hudud. The Ikhwan offspring, if I may say, in the form of AKP party, Erdogan's party in Turkey is not about hudud. Even the more conservative Erbakan, where Erdogan came out from, or AKP came out from Nizam, the party led by Erbakan, even Erbakan does not talk about hudud. And Nada, under the leadership of Ghanouchi in Indonesia, doesn't talk about hudud. They are talking about establishing a good Muslim society and embracing democracy. And in Indonesia, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, the two biggest Muslim groups, even the Gus Dur family, the Gus Dur track, the lineage, there is the thinking which is known as the Gus Dur school of thought. The Habibi school, if you can call it a school in Indonesia, they are not talking about it. They are talking about a comprehensive Muslim society. Qaradawi made a very important opinion, gave a very, to me it's a landmark opinion in 2010, when he no longer talks of, when he made this point that in Muslim majority countries where there are non-Muslim, you can no longer use the classic Islamic jurisprudence of dividing Muslim and non-Muslim, and that the non-Muslim are zimmis, contract citizens or minority citizens, but you must accept them as brothers of, what's the term that he used? It's about wataniyah. It's about equal citizenship. So the Islamists or the Democrat Islamists are now talking about something that is more progressive, something that the Western world can understand very easily, and that is why the Hudud story, at least in the context of us in Malaysia, is to me not mainstream.
I think IS is being manipulated as a threat in Malaysia, and therefore they are passing a series of bills or act called, for instance, Prevention of Terrorism Act, and several other bills this week in Malaysia, in order to bring back Internal Security Act and the sort of detention without trial back into the statute book. But Hudud is really, Saifuddin, is really the issues of the past, not just past issue, but something that of 1980s. In 1980s, as I say, the competition was who was more Islamic in name. So in the forum, I just asked, I say, in the 80s, Anwar was pushing for, Anwar in government was pushing for Islamic financing, Islamic banking, and a lot of other Islamic universities. But Islamic banking and Islamic finance, in actual fact, at that time was ijtihad. It was new thinking. It was new thinking. But after global financial crisis, you look at the Islamic banking system in Malaysia. In many ways, they are repeating what conventional banking is, with marginal change and with a new name. So I was joking. I asked, would a Muslim thinking about justice, economic justice, would they accept the Malaysian government issuing Islamic bond or the sukuk to bail out one MDB, to bail out this company that is in trouble? They say halal or haram. The Hudud debate is similar. In the 80s, it was being who was more Islamic. And of course, in Islamic movement, you have organizations which are more textualist, more literal, and there are also organizations that look at context more to interpret it. Interestingly, within PAS, there was once they were forced to define what was an Islamic state. One group under the leadership of Fadeno came up with a paper. Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad came up with a paper, and the entire paper was about how an Islamic state is a democratic state. And within that paper, there was no mention of Hudud. Whereas Harun Din with Hadi came up with something that everything was about Hudud. Hudud was the center pillar of an Islamic state. So even within the past, there were multiple interpretations and multiple ways of seeing the Hudud debate and the Islamic State debate. So I think that debate belongs to 1980s, and increasingly, especially over the last month or so, more and more people pointing out that, well, it's all for politics. And once that idea continues to be accepted, people will start asking whether those debates of 1980s are relevant to contemporary Malaysia when UMNO is in crisis and PAS is not providing the challenge to UMNO, not standing up to UMNO, but thinking about working with UMNO for this particular bill.
You mentioned how Hudud can be used politically, and Dato Saifuddin mentioned how Hudud might not be feasible or relevant in Malaysia now. Do you think there's any momentum or opportunity from any political party in Malaysia, for a movement towards secularism instead of just moderation?
There are people in Malaysia, among the Muslims, who wants to debate, for instance, whether our constitution is secular or our constitution, or how to make the constitution Islamic. Unfortunately, with the exception of very, very few pockets of good discourses, I think most of the discourses were purely political and sometimes very, very superficial. I don't know if Tong can remember anyone actually, with the exception maybe Zulkifli's paper, who actually trying to explain what an Islamic state which will impinge on the position of the persecution. I think what is more important in Malaysia, at least for the Muslim, is to act like good Muslim and be like good Muslim. And I'll give you one example. Say, for instance, Article 3 of the Constitution talks about Islam as the religion of the Federation. I think for Muslims, they have to understand that the article is divided into three parts. There is only the first part. It is a problem when you are a political leader and you are a Muslim, you read only that first part. The Islam is the religion of the Federation. The second part says all other religions are free to be practiced, embraced and practiced by people of other faith. And the third part of the Article 3 talks about not only they are free to embrace and practice, but also peacefully and harmoniously. As a good Muslim, I won't cease Bible, even if I have the capacity to do so. First of all, I shouldn't have the capacity to do so. As a Muslim, I won't disallow Christians to use Allah. I don't decide on how you call your God or how you name your God. So that's what I mean by that is a more important debate for Muslims in Malaysia, that is to carry themselves as good Muslims and show to the world, and in particular to Malaysian brothers and sisters, that Islam is a mercy to all, and it's not a religion that is exclusive. Of course, when it comes to faith, you are exclusive, but it's not that, Islam is only for Muslim, that Tong cannot talk about Hudud, who are you, that kind of accusation. I think this is the moderation part. I know moderation is not very sexy, and also, but wasatiyah, that angle or that discourse needs to be shared by more, especially by Muslims, vis-a-vis their non-Muslim brothers and sisters. On the issue of moderation in Malaysia, I think, even though many people are talking about it, but the term moderation also have to be understood in a certain way. I always translate moderation, wasatiyah is about a community that is justly balanced. Justly balanced is not simply middle way. A justly balanced society, a justly balanced policy and program and what have you. And where was I going? That term, moderation, must be fully understood so that it is not misinterpreted or misappropriated or hijacked. It can be hijacked in two ways. Number one, in the context of fighting violent extremism, there is a risk that you might try to wipe out the moderates too if you are not careful whom you are branding, not that I like branding, or labeling as extremists and as moderates. Or in the context of Malaysia, the very people who is talking about moderate is now given a new label that they are less Malay and they are less Islam. Suddenly in Malaysia, liberal become a bad word. That fellow Saifuddin is a liberal. And liberal into trouble by Sedition Act, even if they say, burn the Bible or something like that. So yeah, we have to be now more careful in Malaysia when we use the term moderation. Thank you.
What is secularism? In the European context, secularism means equal citizenship, means a religion authority not having control over the political process. And quoting Tariq Ramadan, Muslim should think about Muslim in London or Muslim in Paris should think about secularism as a good thing in many ways, because it provides equal platform for any citizen and not for a certain group of citizens. But in the debate in Malaysia, where did the word secularism come from and how people relate to it? If you talk to the Muslim, secularism is a bad word. And that word, the image came from Turkey, Dato. Is anti-religion. It's not religion-free state, a state without religion's underpinning, but it's anti-religion or zalim, cruel to religion. So that's the image of secularism to the Muslim. Where did the non-Muslim got the idea of secularism? In many ways, it came from the Pakistan-India debate in 1947. Pakistan was an Islamic state. India was a secular state. But today you look at Modi. Is Modi secular? I'm not sure. So I was always telling friends in past, I say, if you can be like Modi, extremist, or maybe not extremist, Hindu nationalist in the state, but well, not necessarily progressive. I don't want to describe him nationally, but not religious, not heavily religious nationally, focusing on the economy. Maybe you can win power if you are like Modi. So I think there are a lot of background meaning that we attach to certain words. Perhaps a more open debate will help to clarify where we got those ideas from. I think the ultimate problem with Malaysia is that the governing factor in Malaysia is fear. Is mistrust, and that has to be overcome. Once you have open discussions, and also you have people who actually try to bridge the gap rather than exaggerating fear, then I think there is a future. The problem now is that all debates are framed with this idea of fear. The Muslim is fearful of being Christianized. The Christians are fearful of being Islamized. And that fear factor has to be overcome with trust, with bridges being built, and eventually dismantling the walls.
So there's three more. I think we'll just keep to those three for the rest of the session. We're just about running out of time. So we'll start at the back there, and then we'll come to you, Mary, and then to...
Thank you both for your wonderful presentations. This is more of a follow-up question for Dr. Saifuddin. You've spoken about you and others advising Dr. Sri Najib about continuing with the reformasi and the transformasi agenda, which, like you said, started very well with the repealment of the ISA, replacement of the Sedition Act, and things like that. But what we're seeing now in recent years, I guess, is a bit of a backtrack and a setback for the agenda with the enforcement of the Sedition Act, and I guess a sort of bringing back the ISA with anti-terror bills, and also with the issue of Hudud as well. Can you speak to a little bit about what you think the reason is for that setback, and whether you think the transformasi agenda is feasible in the current situation? Thanks.
Yeah, I think we just collect the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because it's already towards the end. Yes.
My name is Mary Kiltran-Cody, and I'm a historian of Malaysia, and I teach the Master of Asia-Pacific Studies program in this room, so I feel like I live in this room. Thank you very much for your presentation, and my question is, what I would like to ask is following on from your question is, perhaps you can help me when I deal with my students. We pride ourselves here at the ANU on encouraging students to take a deeper interest in Asian Pacific. And I have students in this classroom every Tuesday night from all over the world. And the question that arises when they come to Malaysia is, what are the social and cultural underpinnings of a society in 2015 that can advance Hudud as a possible political advantage? That is my question.
My question is directed to Dato Saifuddin. I'm very interested that you are labeled as one of the most progressive and the conscience of UMNO. But recently, everyone knows that UMNO is not doing well, and they have been backtracking the democracy, and they have been introducing the POTA and everything, which is a backtrack of democratization. So how do you value yourself in the party, and how your values is reconciled with the party lines, and how much of your views being assimilated in the policy making in Malaysia? Thanks.
Okay, let the MP have the last say. Thank you. Why Najib backtrack is political pressure within UMNO. That's the only reason that I can think of, because otherwise it is only logical that he will continue his transformation. Is transformation still feasible? I'll give you a very practical answer. So long as Idris Jala is there, some form of transformation will be carried out. But Idris Jala's tenure as senator will end like half a year time, and he will no longer be in the cabinet. So can Najib bring a new Idris Jala to do some kind of, because he is the czar of transformation. We need a replacement for Idris. So if we cannot get a replacement of Idris, then it's quite difficult. I wouldn't say it's not feasible at all. Yeah? So it's a very practical answer. The reason for Hudud is really politics, unfortunately. Because if you look at the social and cultural underpinning, it's not going to be Hudud. It has to be something else. If it is a Malay and Muslim narrative, it is about how do we strengthen the institution of Wakaf and Baitul Mal so that we can overcome poverty where it is still prevalent, especially among Malay Muslims. So the logical discourse is about something else. It's not about Hudud. So the only explanation is because of politics. I believe in change, and I believe that change can come from different angles. So people like Tong will say change comes from outside because he's still outside the government. People like me still say that change can come from within. And I think if I can paraphrase Bill Clinton, UMNO, there's nothing wrong with UMNO that cannot be changed with what is right with UMNO. And UMNO is quite good at changing itself. Like in 1982, Tong alluded to it in great length. UMNO did quite well. While PAS was talking about Islamic State, UMNO came up with something more progressive, something more state-of-the-art, if you like Islamic finance and Islamic university, i.e. addressing the Malays of the Ummah, of the people, of the Muslim, of the world, there is education. And it resonates with the Muslim majority, not only in Malaysia, majority of Muslim, not only in Malaysia, but even non-Muslim understand the reason for that. Yeah, because for the non-Muslim in Malaysia, a wealthy Muslim is better than a poor Muslim. You don't want to live next door to a poor man. You would rather live next door to someone, if not richer than you, it would be as rich as well. Whether this resonates in UMNO or not, it depends. Yeah, sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Sometimes you become the sacrifice. But I think you just have to be steadfast, and you just have to soldier on.
Sorry, just want to interrupt. Can't we say Anwar Ibrahim is one of the examples that he tried to change within, but he failed and ended up in prison for so many times?
Oh well,
you think
you are entitled to your opinion. I would say he is probably a victim of that narrative. Yeah, he could be. I mean, it's quite fair to put it that way. Yeah, I don't mind saying I agree with you on that one.
Thanks.
Okay, to answer Mary's questions, perhaps I bring you to a story that I learned here. When I attended the introduction to anthropology 15 years ago, remember this lecturer talking about her experience in Kalimantan. She said she was in a Christian village in Kalimantan where every prayer was done with pork, and she couldn't understand why Christianity is linked to pork. until one day she stepped out from the village and found that the village was surrounded by 7 or 8 Muslim villages. So POC became the differentiation. In the politics of identity, you find something extreme in order to differentiate yourself from others. And I think that was the politics of the 1980s where it underpinned the discourse. And there are still people who think that that will help them to differentiate and to also achieve their political purposes, as I say, to break Pakatan, to consolidate the conservative hold over on past. And I think that gives rise to this whole discourse. Just touching briefly on before I end, what are the possibilities? I think there are maybe 3 foreign examples can help us to think. If Najib stays on for another year and a half, or maybe another 2 years, and then go into election with Najib, maybe we'll have the Indian election of 2014, where Congress Party was wiped out and its legitimacy gone entirely, because I think Najib, with his baggage, he will not be electable, and perhaps the party will go with him. Of course, whether UMNO will allow him to do so, I'm not sure. Of course, there will be another possibility, which is Lyndon Johnson, an old man coming into power, waiting in the wing for many, many years, and suddenly coming to power and do what others never expect him to do, and revive, walking the extra mile. Maybe Muhyiddin can play that role. Of course, if you have Hisham, then you have a nice friend to have drinks with. I'm not sure whether he's capable to run the country. But I don't think Zahid Hamidi is the potential candidate as Prime Minister. I'll never talk about migration, but if Zahid Hamidi becomes Prime Minister, maybe I'll consider that. The other possibility to consider is that it's the Sri Lankan election. The Sri Lankan election was very interesting. Rajapaksa has some support among the Sinhalese, but his opponent, there was a regime split. The health minister went to contest as presidential candidate, and with the support of the Muslim, with the support of Tamil, with half of the Sinhalese, there was a regime change. So maybe these are the possibilities that food for thought.
Thank you very much indeed. I began the seminar by saying that there were momentous changes going on at the moment in Malaysia, and I think that the speakers have both reinforced that message. Can I just mention very briefly, we're hopeful that ANU also will be recognising this by the establishment of the Global Malaysian Studies Network by the end of this year. This is a joint venture between Malaysia and ANU, and Dato Saifuddin, formerly as the Deputy Higher Education Minister, helped bring this about. So we are hopeful that this also will be recognised very much at ANU. There are still some final details to be worked out, but we're hopeful somebody will be appointed to this position within the Political and Social Change Department by the end of this year. Can I just finally say thank you very much to both the speakers for an absolutely excellent presentation, and ask you to express your appreciation.